Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining the first interview in LHH's Women in Leadership Conversation Series for 2023. As a quick reminder, all lines are muted and you can place any questions you have in the Q&A function. I'll now hand you over to your host for today's session, Margot Hoyt, Head of North American Leadership Development Business. Margot, over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you so much, Dylan. It's wonderful to be joining you today for the third year of our conversation series around women in leadership. It's a tremendous opportunity for us to learn from other women and hear more about what has influenced their career and their success and their insights for others. We're just delighted to be kicking off this year with Amy Burford. A quick note about who LHH is. For those of you who saw in the video or who know us, we are a global talent services or solutions organization. You may know us through the work we do in recruitment, in our professional recruitment business. You may know us through our career transition and mobility practice, where we support employees who are leaving one organization to find their next opportunities. Or as Dylan mentioned, I lead our leadership development business. And that's really supporting leaders to grow and to develop so they can execute your strategies. We are delighted to be putting on this series for really one reason only, and that is to share with other women the opportunities and the inspiration to advance their own careers. And we're just delighted that Amy Burford from Fidelity Investments is joining us today. Let me give you a little bit of a background about Amy before we start to jump in. Amy is the digital transformation lead at Fidelity Investments. Her expertise spans product management, operations, general management, sales, and entrepreneurship. She has over a decade of experience in the telecom industry, after which she transitioned to tech, and she's worked in both startup and Fortune 500 companies. Amy is a lifelong student and enthusiastic seeker, a term that I think we're going to dive a little bit into later. And we're delighted to have her join us today. So welcome, Amy. So nice to have you here with us.
I'm so excited to be here.
That's terrific. So today, how we're going to spend our time together, for those of you who are watching, Amy and I are going to have a conversation, and we'll just start to explore some of her background and ideas and insights. Then we will definitely open it up to a Q&A period. So as we go through this first part of the session, please be sure to drop your questions in the Q&A. I'll give you a last minute warning as we start to get into the Q&A session, and you can continue to put your questions in there. We'll get to absolutely as many as we can and aim to start into that portion of our program around 25 to or 20 to the hour. So with that, Amy, let's get started.
All right.
I want to start with just a really general open question. So when you think about your career, and as you coined it, the Amy 1.0, 2.0, and the current version 3.0,
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your trajectory and some of the important milestones and people along the way for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say people have blessed my career path, many of them. So I joke I'm on Amy 3.0 now. I just made a career pivot a year and a half ago to come to Fidelity. And it really was a lot of women and connections that helped make this possible. I wasn't sure what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I think it's crazy that we have to pick one thing. And so I went into a networking organization called Chief and just started talking to a lot of women and understanding a lot of what I don't want, right? Which actually helped highlight what I did want. And it's through the gift of people that I was able to find this opportunity.
You know, it's so interesting. Curiosity is the theme that I often hear when people are talking about their careers and kind of what has been a theme for them. And that you know, the difficulty sometimes of narrowing it down to one career, right? There was a generation not long before us where it was 30 years in one organization, perhaps, right?
That was my dad. Yes.
That was your dad, right?
Yes, yes.
And many of us who are parents who are on this listening. What role do you, or how do you really think about curiosity and how it's influenced your career steps? What has that really meant for you?
I think it balances your desire for expert status, right? That's how a lot of times we actually get promoted and we do transition into our career is by being the expert in something and being good, but always bringing that beginner's mindset to anything, because it's actually the more you know, the more you don't know, right? And when you collapse the possibilities because you think you're the expert, you sometimes miss a good opportunity, whether it's for your career or as a solution to a problem.
Excellent. So you started your career at Lucent. Tell us a bit about how you transitioned then from 1.0, which I'm assuming is that portion of your career, into the next.
Yes. So 1.0 was straight out of college. I actually started with a headhunting firm, and they put me to work as a consultant at Lucent. And I spent 10 years there growing up and did everything from product management to sales to even some operations. And it was actually me and the linear line of rule follower that thought, okay, I have to do some of everything to be a well-rounded leader. And that led me to take a job outside of Lucent in operations. And what I realized is, we're not all meant to do all things. And after a year of waking up in the middle of the night, answering distress phone calls and running bridges, I started getting some mentorship about what I really loved and what I was good at to transition back to sales.
And what did your mentor tell you at that point in time? I mean, clearly sometimes it's tough to go back, or what was it that sort of jolted you into taking action, really?
Well, he kind of said, like, just because you haven't done it doesn't mean you have to do it, right?
Yeah.
And so that was an interesting thing, because I had always looked up at leaders who had multiple types of jobs, not one. And I thought that was the cloth to cut yourself from in order to go up. And so what it did do is it helped me be a well-rounded salesperson at selling the business. I had a perspective for how it felt before, after I did that, which actually was one of the things that helped make me successful.
You've mentioned Chief, you've mentioned mentorship. I can't go further without asking a little bit more before we get to Amy 3.0, but how do you think about mentorship, and what role do you think it's played in your own success to date?
I think it's really evolved. Back when I first started, I thought mentorship was like a long engagement and somebody helped me and I was under a wing, and where I was trying to create that, it's hard, right? Because time is usually a big factor for mentorship. As I've matured, I think I've realized the impact of even small half-hour or hour networking conversations have on my perspective, and just continuing to keep me curious and open up. And that's the gift that Chief and some of the other programs I've been into have really offered, is just the ability to meet people and keep expanding, what you think is possible.
Yeah, it's so important to have some honest people who are in your corner, but are willing to give you, the push that you need, or some feedback about what they see from a different perspective, or even to inspire something that maybe you hadn't thought about before or didn't know you could do, I guess.
Well, I think it also is impactful because it helps you get more clear on what are you looking for. So I think before, is you want a mentor was kind of a big thing, and I was wanting that. And now I'm really clear when I go out, like, do you know anybody who has done this or who's been in this situation? And so the quality of the question is often the quality of the answer. And so I've gotten a lot more clear on what I'm looking for, which means the person who is going to offer me time can be more succinct. So that's why it's gone from like, I need somebody to mentor me, which is a long, thing I was looking for in an engagement, to, does anybody know XYZ? And they can tell me in sometimes 15 minutes.
Right. Excellent. I think that's really important because, when you say the quality of the question has a lot to do with the quality of the answer, I didn't get it quite right, but it's what we're looking for, right? So how we set up these mentorship relationships is really important. And I hear lots of stories where they haven't gone well, or it hasn't been a good experience. But your points, I think, is really well taken. If you know what you're looking for, it can be it can be a much more concise, efficient use of time, right? And not so overwhelming and expansive, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And even as a manager, that's one of the things I bring into feedback for my team, is I don't, when they're looking to go to the next level, to director or something like that, we don't work on it as a whole. We really isolate things, and we break it down into quarters. Otherwise, it can feel overwhelming, and then you don't really understand what progress you're making in those key areas.
So before I move on to Amy 3.0, what makes you a good mentor today? When you approach mentoring others, what do you really think about bringing to those conversations?
I really meet them where they're at. And I don't bring my own agenda. So I think that's why I feel passionate about making sure you're clear on what you want when you're asking for mentorship, because that's one of the things that really impacts the level of impact I have on somebody else's career is what are they asking me? Why me, right? How can I help them? And when they're clear on what they're looking for or what they'd like to ask, I notice there is a correlation in what they'll give me as feedback.
Interesting. Okay, so now let's get back to that transition from Amy 2.0 to Amy 3.0. Tell us a bit about how that has transpired.
Yeah, so I loved sales. I'd been doing it many decades, as you would say. But it just wasn't giving me back what I was giving it. And so I started to really, I looked at that Japanese circle thing where it's like, what are you good at? What do you love? And I love all the things about it. I love people. I love being on the cutting edge. I love technology. And as I started writing them down and having discussions with other women, listening to the mirror of what they saw when I told them what I would love, or when they'd say, wow, you're really lit up when you do XYZ, helped me reframe my I am statement from I am a salesperson to I am a transformation leader. And that's part of even what I love about people. I'm also an ICF certified coach. So it really felt like it fit. And then as I changed the I am statement, that changed like what jobs I looked at and how I might be able to use that unique, I call it a Swiss Army knife of skills to make an impact in an organization. So I created space. I transitioned out of a role that I had been purchased by a company. And then I had 3 months off. Well, it ended up being 3 months to find a new role. And it was just through all those conversations and trying things actually that people were like, what? You don't fit this job. And I'm like, I know, but I'm passionate about this job. And Fidelity let me come in on my passion and my past that didn't really fit the exact role that they had.
That's fascinating. And you know what I love about that is that redefining yourself, right? Just was one word, right? But it's such an important word and such an important statement. Being able to think about yourself differently can open up so many doors and really has taken you into your next chapter, I guess.
It is. It's been phenomenal because I realized I thought it was such a different role and I thought I was making this big career change, but it's really not. I'm still doing the same thing I was kind of doing when I was selling tech as a software as a service vendor and customer experience. Now I'm impacting customer experience, but I'm still selling but I'm selling internal teams and coordinating all that stuff on the inside. So it's very similar, which joke's on me for thinking it's a full 3.0, right?
But you still have to take a bit of a different lens on things. So
that's true. Yes,
that's good. You mentioned you're an ICF coach, which not everybody is, and when they're in a leadership role within an organization. How do you think that that's impacted how you support other women and how they can advance?
I realized how much work I was trying to do for other people and be the white horse when it's not my work, it's their work. So really letting them hold that, asking more open-ended questions instead of yes/no questions actually helps the people that work for me and or women I mentor really get into their own responses. Sometimes hearing ourselves talk is one of the most powerful things we can do. So providing that space and letting them really discover where they're at and, you know, what they might say when I ask them an open-ended question has been impactful.
It's amazing. I love the, I'm not certified myself, but I've gone through the coaching training. And I think that it gives you, could make you a better salesperson. It makes you a better listener, makes you a better coach. And when you think about really, you know, helping to advance other women helping other women to advance their careers, those are skills that we could all use.
Yes, the only one that complains is my husband. He's always like, stop coaching me.
It's hard to switch in and out, right?
It is, yeah.
When do you need it, when not to need it? You mentioned Chief as well. So I wanted to give you a chance to share a little bit about that because clearly this network has been something that's been a really important network for you.
Yeah, so I grew up in predominantly male technology firms, right? Where I think as a sales team, when I was at Lucent, I was one of maybe 5 or 6 women on a sales team. So I just hadn't been exposed to having a lot of women friendships or mentors or any of that at work. And so Chief really threw me in the deep end of that and helped me kind of build trust and understand what's possible. And because I think sometimes we can come in from past experiences and bring that baggage with us. So it really helped me understand also how to show up for other women, right? So again, it helped me realize like what I perceived we want from each other versus what we can give. And just the volume of the connections as well has helped me get a different view of diversity of, what are the common themes amongst all of us across many industries, and which is some really big differences.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, this is obviously a well-structured organization, but I think lots of women are finding their own personalized ways of creating different types of networks as well, where this may not be available to them. So being able to seek out women in other industries, get a sense of what it's like in different organizations even, right? That kind of broadens our perspective on what advancement could look like. And again, what you say, some things are the same and some things that are different, and how do we learn from each other, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've done everything from small local meetups where I live in Southwest Florida, not a lot of tech women down here. So, I get a total different view all the way to, my employer offers a lot of different groups and meetups. So definitely encourage people to keep trying, not to judge one book by its cover, and keep going, because just one connection makes all of them worth it.
That's amazing. So let's make that shift now to, I want to talk about what organizations are doing to advance women and some of your insights, things that you've seen that are working really well to promote women and promote their advancement, to really find that equity. What kind of insights could you share about what's either worked for you or that you've seen work well for other women?
Yeah. I think works well for me is finding space for myself to actually create learning. I think sometimes when we're just chasing ourselves, we're not showing up in some of our best superpowers. So that's one of the things that's super important. And I love how Fidelity supports all of their employees, and that is we create a Tuesday learning day. So Tuesday mornings are dedicated to learning, and we have ones that you can go to if you want to attend. There's a lot of courses that are online that they can support you with, or you can just take it and study whatever you need to study so that you're not go, conference call.
Yeah. We do tend to get ourselves into a bit of a hamster wheel if we don't actually schedule the time, right, to sit and to reflect. And my sense is that, as you've moved through your career in these different stages, that opportunity to reflect has been really important. That requires white space.
Yes. So even before I came here, I used to dedicate a portion of my commission checks to personal development. So I'd take a percentage over, and then I would either spend a week going to a seminar, or I would take 3 days off and hole myself up in, someplace and read a book. Like definitely is a reset because I noticed I would come back better. In fact, my old team used to joke around, if I'd come back after a week, they'd be like, what seminar did you go to? Or, did you see? Because they could just feel it coming off me.
I think that's extraordinary, and a great reminder that we have to invest in ourselves, right? That it's something that we need to do, and where an organization can support it, that's terrific, but we also need to make it ourselves a priority in that investment.
I feel that if you're not willing to invest in yourself, it's also interesting to ask somebody to invest in you. So to me, they're correlated to where, in fact, I recently became Prosky certified. It's not something Fidelity supports. So that is something I still paid for out of my own pocket this year.
Yeah. That's terrific. Learning and development is so important. And sometimes we think, we've gone to university, or we go through our orientation and onboarding in first years, and then we kind of just do all of our learning on the job. But these other certifications and courses and seminars and books are obviously adding a lot to your career as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Before we even contemplate getting to some of the Q&As, Amy, think about, some of the one-on-one advice that you would give. We've got men and women at different stages of their careers, early, mid, and I'm sure some in their later parts of their careers. If you were to give them some of your personal advice, what would that look like?
It's going to sound very cliche, but I would say the authenticity piece is super important to me. As I've coached a lot of mid-career, especially, a lot of people are just one piece of themselves, are trying to be what they think the other person needs them to do. And really where my career shut off is when I brought like mom Amy and work Amy and my hobby Amy and all those kinds of Amy's, and I put them all together in one person and came and offered that to the company. That's actually where my career took just a total different turn, because there was a depth and a perspective that I was able to bring that even I didn't realize was there. And so I definitely think that's something I would suggest.
Is that something that just kind of came to you? Like what was the motivation, do you think, to really shift how you were thinking about yourself? And what
it was actually through coaching other people and seeing in the mirror where they, like, I knew something about them because I knew them personally. We had been working together for a long time, but they wouldn't show up like that in a meeting. And so it was through giving them feedback, and I'd understand, they would say where they were stuck on that. And then I would sit back. I am a very reflective person and be like, wait, where do I do that? And, you know, asking questions like, do you see me do that? And then they'd be like, well, yeah, kind of, because I know this and you showed up in the meeting like that. And so it was actually through helping other people and feedback that I always look and try the shoe on myself as well.
When you're spending time with others and helping them, it's hard not to ask yourself the same kinds of questions, right, that you're asking of others.
One of my very good friends that's a coach would always say, if you spot it, you got it, right? So that was one of the things that always got me on that.
Yeah, I love that. Any other pieces of advice for individuals that you think that would be really helpful for, let's say, somebody in their mid-career?
Mid-career, I think, is the biggest area. I think having an investment in somebody to give you perspective on the outside is so valuable. I spent a week with women in the transportation industry in the mid-career level, and the biggest theme was the story that they had in their head and how that was limiting them. So like really looking at where your identity is and what story you have that you're telling yourself that might be part of the root cause of whatever you're stuck at. I would say a good 50% of the women, that's what we worked on, is retelling that story. And you can use the same facts, right? But just tell it in a different story that really lets you take the wisdom from it. And it's, you know, some things we try to say, oh, that was a bad job or that was a bad decision. Those actually can be the richest stories to actually help you bring a wisdom to a new role.
It's interesting. I've had the pleasure of working with a number of women, high potential women that organizations have highlighted. And I think what I love the most is that very early on, just the visioning of what I want to be as a leader and the ability to articulate it. And that crisp or practice, I guess, of being able to say to somebody else, I want to advance. I think I can do this. I would love to tackle this challenge next in my personal growth or in my corporate role. It can be a big leap, right? It can be a very big leap to get from I'll wait for somebody. And I think that's a stereotypical female trait. I'll wait for somebody to tell me I can do something, or to, put me here and over there and tell me what I'm going to do really well next in my career, rather than having that more of that control and vision and empowerment to move your own career.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the biggest gifts I had in my career is getting fired. And this was probably 15 years ago. I was a salesperson at a startup and they brought in a new manager and I got let go. And I was the only salesperson and I was at 100 and something % of my number. And it really blew up what I thought good looked like, right? Because I think that we think that if we do good, right, someone reaches down, grabs us and puts it up, right? And it really opened my eyes to like, there's many, many facets of moving up, and the only person I can control is me. And so, I stopped just like burning the midnight oil for one number on my, scoreboard, and really looked at, a bigger piece of the pie.
That's fascinating. It's sometimes the things that feel like the greatest setbacks, right, can have
Yes.
the most input or impact on your life. So I'm going to start looking at the Q&As, but while I do that, I'm going to ask you a question just about, when you think about the men in organizations, and I often hear from them around, what can we do organizationally? What can we do as individual allies? What kind of an influence have men had on your career directory and your success so far?
A lot, since they were pretty much the majority of probably 90% of my first 20 years. And I would say that it was actually men who took the time to get to know more than one side of me, right? Who learned not just Amy on this project or Amy on this deal or whatever, and encouraged me to keep going. That was a huge pivot point in multiple places in my career. In fact, I had one guy in particular at one of my roles being like, you need to go for a raise. And,
Wow.
put together how you're going to ask for it. And you tell me and you role play it with me. And then I'm going to tell you, because a lot of it was presence oriented. He was giving me feedback on. And so definitely huge impact on just working together on co-creating, right? It was never an us versus them. It was always, how do we do this together? How can I help you? And I've been blessed to have a ton of really awesome men in my life, especially in the early years with telecommunications. It supported me to, I think at Lucent, over the 10 years, I had 5 different positions. Okay. So all of that was enabled by, people asking me, do you want to try this? Do you want to try that? And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. It's, it's fascinating just to have somebody that's so deeply in your corner. It doesn't matter if they're male or female, but that belief in you and wanting to see you succeed, right? Can make the difference, make a huge difference. Yeah.
Yes. And just remembering the people part, right? Sometimes I think we get on projects that oppose each other, or we're fighting for resources sometimes in different organizations, and really getting at the people level of it, I think helps us remind all of us to help each other, right? Because we're all trying to, grow and do the right thing for the company.
There's a question that's just popped in around asking for a raise. So I'm going to start with that one. When you go for the raise and you don't get it, but the men in the same role do get it, you had that experience, and how do you handle it?
Yes, but I'm probably a little bit unique, is that I try to focus on the person I can control as me. So I, just like in a sales thing, I try to isolate the objection. What is it that you need me to do? How do I put together a learning path? When can I come back to you with getting feedback on that? So before, when I would go for a raise and I'd get the feedback, I would put together an action plan and deliver it as a piece of it, and then hold myself accountable. I've been blessed to not be in the situation where I've taken those actions and still didn't get it. Each time I've done that, it's worked out.
It's good to have the strategy, right? I'm hearing the feedback, I'm taking the action plan, right? Now there's no other choices.
Yes.
Here's a woman who's transitioning from being an early childhood educator to a human resources professional. It's been a great change so far, but I'm wondering what other training or transition tips you might have. Really building on that, investing in yourself as you transition through different parts of your career.
Yeah. I think look at what is so whenever I go into a new piece of career, so like even me in the latest piece I had, I looked for, where am I struggling? What don't I know? So like for me, I knew how to sell digital transformation. I knew how we implemented, I knew how to do the team piece, but there was something that I was losing in creating the compelling event and helping lead the organization here. And so I looked at, how do other transformation and digital technologies do this? And that's how I found the change management curriculum that kind of gives that repeatable process. And so I did, research different options and found to go ahead on that. So I looked through like, what is the piece where you're feeling the least confident?
Yeah.
And what is the thing where you're like, okay, this could have gone better, but what tool would I have had differently? And then I always start with YouTube because it's free. There is no reason that you can't learn something. My daughter came down, she's 10. She had complete face of makeup on the other day, taught herself in 2 hours how to put makeup on from YouTube. So we can learn anything on there. And so I always start there and get interested and try out a couple things and understand how it's working before, and then just kind of keep going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. And the two skills that when I think of in terms of going through my career that will be transferable and probably always applicable, or how do you lead change? Because every part of every organization seems to be going through continuous change, right? And then going back to the coaching, right? If we're going to be in management roles, that those coaching skills are absolutely incredibly important. Here's another question about being in a male-dominated workspace. So do you think that your exposure to male-dominated workspaces has helped you to be a better coach for women?
Yes, because I've seen it all. And also being a salesperson, right? Because you don't choose who you sell to, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times you can be with personalities that don't naturally mesh with yours, and trying to find a way to create connection. But in the end, you're trying to help them move from their current state to their future state, which is in all change and growth, what you're trying to do. So I believe and doing that with people that you don't click with when, you're trying to sell something, obviously has been a huge impact on me and my versatility to be able to work with multiple people.
Here's something that's kind of interesting, because you mentioned that you don't always get to work with people you love. You don't always get to choose them. But it's like, where did it go? How would you handle a hostile team?
So one of the best things I've done, one of my dear friends, Beth Wanson, did Navigating Challenging Dialogue. And so one of the things that we always come back to when we work the process, I was able to get certified in it, is if you can find nothing else in common with the person before you get ready to have this conversation and go into the challenging dialogue, the one thing we all have in common is we have a beating heart. And so to start there and realize we're both human, we both have human needs, right? They might be on different edges of the spectrum, but starting with something in common is helpful whenever there's tension, because it kind of breaks up that back and forth. It's one way or the other.
Yeah. It's a good reminder. We are all human. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it, right? When things are heated, but that's a great thing to go back to. I'm going to ask you a question as a precursor to this question, but when did you know that you wanted to be a leader? When did you know that advancing your career into leadership roles was important, or a destination for you?
I did. In fact, the first time I became a leader, I actually went back to individual contributor because it was hard. It is really hard. And after actually 2 times I got promoted to manage people, I went back both times to individual contributor, because the skills that actually made me a good individual contributor were not the ones to make me a good leader. And I was a micromanager, and people didn't care for that. I don't care for that as an individual contributor. And so I had to keep going back and having different leaders and looking at okay, what do you do differently? What do I like about it? And so it wasn't, I did best actually by learning how to manage cross-functional teams that were more dotted line. And so that's where I started really working with my own style of inspiring or leading without authority. So, how did that work for me, and what were some of those techniques, and really worked on that before I tried again to go the third time.
So then this question is a nice follow-up for that. What are the key factors that you think differentiate someone who's ready for a leadership role versus not?
This is a good one. So to me, I look for especially on my team, and what I tell them is, are you leading from where you're at? And how is that showing up for you? And what are you doing in your role? And how are you stretching beyond that? I think a lot of times people that are doing their individual contributor role well are okay, I aced that, let's go to the next one. But actually, I think in my case, I'm biased, obviously, because I went back twice, is getting over your ski tips a little bit in your current role is a piece that will tell you what you do and don't like about leadership, or where you're gifted or where you're not, on how you need to go. So for example, for me, when I was managing salespeople, it's a totally different skill set than it is now for me managing teams. My skill set as a leader is actually much better now for teams, because I'm able to hold space for them and guide them, but I don't need to, I'm not as responsible for their number as I was when I was a sales leader, and I'm responsible for that number. So it's harder that I felt was harder because I lived and died by that sword, but I had to kind of also be unattached from the outcome. So to me, the biggest thing is like you're a little bit bored and you're showing that you're using that time to go into other areas and stretch and add value, whether it's to your organization, your company, or maybe even outside work.
Yeah, I've often thought about it as, you've got to be starting to demonstrate the skills that you need in your next role before you're in it, right? So that there's that inclination, it's naturally, something that you want to move towards, and you've been practicing already, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Here's an interesting one. I had a leader say it's not what you know or how good you are in your work, but how you play the game with higher up. How do you work around that to stay driven?
So, and especially in larger companies, I would say sometimes I do feel like a political action consultant. And I have to reframe that story often for myself of like, what's everybody's goal and where are they going? And, remind each other, like, we're not on different sides of the table. We're going for the same additional value for the company. I think also is doing the right thing, right? Coming back to, in Fidelity, our goal is to do the right thing by our end investors to make sure that they're able to go to a successful retirement. So I start all the way there, and then I start backing up to each org and kind of reminding myself.
Yeah, good advice. Good advice. Here's someone. I love my current role and could contribute more for my company, utilizing my skill set. It might involve creating a new position. I'm nervous for the unknown and not having the stability of my current well-defined role. Any insights? That's a great question. I love this one.
So certainty is one of the 6 basic human needs. And so I notice this a lot as well in my team when they're expert in it and everybody comes to them, but they know all the answers, right? And so where do you balance that satisfaction of really knowing something with your own personal growth? I think in creating a new role, it's the best of both worlds, right? Because you can try it on, like you can take it on a project basis. You can create pieces like, this is what I do know and this is what I don't know. And I'm really also passionate about making sure you do quarterly reviews with your boss, whether it's formal in your company or not, because it allows you the ability to pivot without getting all the way to the end of the year and realizing that there were unspoken expectations. So I feel like in this situation, some close touch points of like just making sure that you're kind of calibrating as you go with the leadership is, something that will actually maybe help it unfold by following your joy too. Like, hey, I know you said this, but I really am feeling and I'm excited to go do that. How would that fit? And so might actually end up being a more exciting role.
That's really interesting. And I love the idea of doing frequent reviews and kind of taking control of that, because I think one of the things that women are criticized for generically is that they aren't really necessarily as good tooting their own horn or sharing what accomplishments that they've made. So in addition to making sure that you're aligned and shaping this new role potentially, it's also an opportunity to share what you've accomplished so far in a really kind of matter-of-fact way. What's your experience been with either getting comfortable sharing, your accomplishments and feeling good and, kind of sitting in that confidence and being able to express that, yes, I've done this and I can do that. And I have these skills, for instance.
Yeah, this is something I also would say, mid-careers that are wanting to get promoted. It's an awesome thing I do with a lot of my clients is I have them buy one of those big desk calendars that are like the months. And every day you write down, what are you proud of that happened that day? Or what did you complete or whatever? And you just write down 1 or 2 things a day. And then naturally, by the time you get to the end of the month, you have 25 or 30. And then what you do is you just need to write an email that has 3 that says, this month I did blah, blah, blah. But sometimes I think when it's in the past, we kind of forget about it. Yeah. So just the small thing of like, at the end of the day, you're like, oh, awesome. I had a great conversation with Margot today. I'm going to write that down. Right. And then when I step back and I look at the month of March, that can be one of the highlights of the things that I'm really excited to share up.
That really resonates with me because I think we're always so worried about what we need to do next and how are we going to tackle this next opportunity or challenge, that taking the time to reflect and kind of embrace and celebrate some of the things that you've done really well over the past month or so is also a great part of our development. I love that. That resonated with me. I'm taking that one away. I easily take one or two things away from each of these conversations. So that's terrific. I hope that helped to the woman who is asking about creating her own role. That's very exciting. So this is coming from someone who's saying, great story, Amy. I can't remember which one because I didn't see when it came in, but what has been your biggest challenge or the area you worked on intrinsically when you have started growing in leadership roles?
My own ego.
Interesting. Say more.
So I think this is a double-edged sword, because one of the biggest challenges I've had as a leader is sometimes seeing the greatness in somebody and you can't get it to come out, or you see something they don't see, right? And really taking yourself out of that, because it's not my work, and just kind of keep one breadcrumb at a time is hard, because you can see like, oh my God, if you would just get out of your own way, you could go, right? And so really like my ego of wanting them to do well. And then also like, that's really shifted me to understand where I'm collapsing to judgment. So, really investigating that and getting more like, okay, why do you think that? And, what does it mean about, again, I look in the mirror a lot, like what does that mean you see, feel, or do inside? So those are big pieces. The other thing I would say is bringing in personal pieces to someone's professional advice. So this is a theme I saw a lot when I was leading sales teams, is people's personal feelings or things at home would also create a glass ceiling for how they would be at work. And with salespeople, it's more intertwined, because you just have to be more fortified, because you take a lot of rejection. And
right.
So one of these things was just making sure that, how do I start coaching them about something that they might be having happen with their parents or their kids or their personal life, and how that impacts what do they bring to work. That's just a sensitive area. But I noticed like when we tweak some of these things and we understand where there's a theme on both sides, and you help them realize that, like changes are so much more impactful. Like they're just the steps they take are much bigger.
So they can actually start to draw parallels in their behavior and things that are happening in their personal life and in their professional life, and see those threads connect, if you will. Great. Here's a great one. We see this a lot with women, and I think especially having gone through a pandemic and all of the other demands that we have in our lives. How have you had to balance your career and family, especially having a child? Did you have to let go of any career aspirations and compromise to take care of your family?
So my biological kids are a decade apart. So I definitely got to see the difference in Amy 1.0 as a parent versus Amy 2.0 as a parent. And there were some big impacts. I would say between 1.0 and 2.0, the biggest impact is I was always feeling guilty for where I wasn't, which meant I was never really where I'm at. So if I was home, I was feeling guilty I wasn't working. If I was on a business trip, I was feeling guilty I wasn't home. And there's just no winning that. You can never win that game. And so with my daughter being later, I'm 100% present where I'm at. And the impact on her memory of me traveling is, she doesn't even think about it, like, because I'm so present when I'm with her. Definitely it's impacted my career, but I would say most of that was my own doing because of this start, stop. I did receive feedback at a couple different roles that's part of what leadership felt. They didn't know if I was all in because they were feeling that start and stop.
I think that's fascinating. And again, it's a mindset, isn't it? About, should I feel guilty about this, or should I actually be really leaning into what this is providing? Because, the more senior your role is, the more opportunities you have to do some things with your family, for instance, or to enjoy your children at different times, right? The fact that you work a lot can be seen as a real negative that you feel guilty about, or it can be seen as the fact that you're good at something and you're passionate about what you do and you make wonderful contributions to other people's lives, right? So just having that switch flip a bit for us can help us see that It's, you don't have to, the balance, there is some kind of a balance there. There's a good point to everything that we're doing personally and professionally, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also a perspective that I brought between Amy 2.0 and 3.0, right? Like part of that is where it wasn't giving to me enough, right? Like where I felt like it just wasn't fitting anymore. And that was a big part of me making a career shift, is so that it's also an example for her and how I show up as well.
Yeah.
Because I'm just happier. I even have like random neighbors across the street that can noticeably physically see the difference in me after I've shifted jobs.
Well, if that isn't an incentive to reflect on who we are and what we want from our lives, our complete lives, then I don't know what is. Here's one. Any advice for a woman thinking of changing their career path and networking better, and how important networking really is when you're thinking about making it quite a significant shift in your career, right?
Yeah, I think what I always do is the overlapping circles, because it helps you just get a different perspective on yourself in different roles. So like I had, Amy 1.0 in a circle and 2.0 in a circle. And then what do I love that I wanted to keep in 3.0? And I started looking at what are the common themes that would be in the middle. And I didn't even know what that job was. I tried things like sales enablement. I tried transformation, right? So a lot of it was, I was Googling just the words and understanding where do those fall inside of job description. And does that sound like something that lights me up? And, I was blessed to be able to take the time to actually, took me 3 months to find a role, but definitely if you're going to do a transition, I would plan for that downtime. That's probably my one regret, is I wish I would have planned more from a finance perspective. So I felt empowered to take time. It was the first time I had not had a job since I was 14.
Right.
And I didn't realize the impact of how it would feel to not get up and have to do something and to be in choice. And it was a big pivot.
Yeah. And not something you wanted to rush, right? So that's why having the comfort that you could take the time you absolutely needed to find the next role that you would fill your life.
Yes.
Okay. So how would you handle a female manager who does not support you, or one you think feels intimidated by your potential success?
I'm going to go with curious for, again. So to me, like I would get curious on why is that my story? What do I have that supports that? What do I have that doesn't support that? And just start like unfolding the facts, because a lot of times when I see that, it's also like, when I felt that way, I've been very vulnerable, bringing in a new idea and I'm pushing the norm because I'm a transformation person. Like, of course, they're not going to be like, yeah, this is great, right? Mess everything up. So a lot of times we're just not used to the feedback we get of somebody, like what our unspoken expectations are. So I always really dig into like, what are the facts and what are my unspoken expectations? And the biggest two questions that we always say is, what do I want? What am I looking to get out of a conversation? And what do you think the other person wants? So that we can kind of understand both perspectives.
Get aligned that way. And it's interesting. I think one of the words in here is that it's a female manager. And, I would hope that we could say, Amy, that over the last few decades, we've seen more room for women to lift other women up and feel less combative or competitive. But what's your experience been? I mean, I know you've been in predominantly male-oriented fields. Do you think make it more challenging for women because they have to be more competitive? Or do you see a shift in women really supporting other women and lifting them up?
So I think I'm biased because I'm surrounded by chief women. So it is they're so supportive. But I do have to say, like, switching from very male dominated industries for so long and then switching to Fidelity, where I'm in marketing, so it's more female dominated. I was exhausted for 2.5 weeks because we're on Zoom, right? And females in general, I didn't realize this until I went through it. They just send you so much more nonverbal cues especially over Zoom, than what I was accustomed to. And so I would get to the end of the day and I would be exhausted. So I do think that to me, that's where the difference is, and why I would go to get curious on, okay, what are my facts and what do I have? Because I didn't realize that that was something even I probably did until I started noticing how I was reacting to a screen full of, 80% women.
That's fascinating. There's a scientific research study in there somewhere. Here's one. In my role, I push out a lot of online training on interpersonal skills, but find this often falls on deaf ears or seen as just another task to complete. Any tips on how to get teams motivated to further their training or change their mindset on the importance of training?
So it's a sales job, right? So whenever you're trying to get anywhere, you got to understand where their current state is and where do they want to go as their future state. So to me, like, I listened to my one-on-ones for my team, and I had core skills that as a product analyst they should do. And then I noticed the theme of where everybody was struggling. And so I put together a little talk on leading without authority for all of them, because it's something that they all needed to move forward on. I looked at their goals of where they wanted to go from a career perspective. 4 of them wanted to become more product owners. So I helped find a course that they could all take together. So I think it's about aligning, like, where do they want to go, and finding patterns in these people of, okay, you want to go this way, like, let's put some and go this way. And you don't want to do that. You want to go this way, and doing, their goal-based skills. Because when people want to learn something, they have to be open to learn. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to just sit somebody down into a training session and expect them to take it in a meaningful way if they don't see the motivation or have the motivation for doing it. Right.
Well, and one of the biggest things I do, even when I train as a coach, is integration is so important. So I never, like, just learning and talking to somebody. I don't enjoy that as an instructor. They don't enjoy it as a participant. So really finding a way to either use my stories, ask for their stories, get their problems. So, like, one of the things I love as a coach in a group is using the ladder of inference of, like, how did we walk up? That's the unspoken expectations and what you bring. So using those things really help them integrate the training differently too, because they'd be like, oh yeah, I need to do that because I skipped from this step to that step, and I missed some stuff, right? And so right. I always build that kind of time where you can, go off other people or, do an exercise or something, because I think it's an important piece of adult learning.
Excellent. Here's one, and I think a lot of women feel this, and, we're talking about how women advance. What do you do if the leader of your team does not support your advancement in the organization, although you're highly valued in the same larger organization? So it might be a team lead or a direct report, I guess, reporting relationship. How do you get around that if you really feel like you don't have the support of your team leader?
So I think my sales DNA is going to come out again. So I think I always have, and this was actually in Leading Without Authority by Keith Ferrazzi as well, as part of that thing I did with my team. But I have them create relationship matrices and understand who's on your larger team, and are they a detractor, a supporter, or neutral, and trying to kind of just outlay it and understand, because I think sometimes too, we can collapse it and be this one person doesn't support us and forget all the people that do, and that there's more than one path to get to where you want to go. And it doesn't necessarily, like, yes, if you want to stay in the company, it makes it harder, but there's ways to document what you've done and be factual and keep adding value that can't be missed by other people.
Excellent. There's not only one path. I love that. I love that, right? Like, you can't be deterred because one path seems to have a block on it.
Yes.
How do you help people find their good, or the good that they can bring out? What a lovely question. I like that.
So I have a lot of, I love personality tests. So I've done a lot of Enneagrams in my past. I'm certified in human design. So I've used that a lot in my coaching. I'm also love strength finders for teams and team buildings, where we talk about what are the top 5 and really, like, how does that help us complement each other? So I think finding something that just gives you the ability, again, to have that feedback and that mirror, and allows you to focus on one thing. I think a lot of times when we look for good, we want 100% good, 100% bad. Even I'm, I don't consider myself to be 100% good, right? Like, I have bad days and dark moments, right? And so I think really moving from the either or to the both and is an important component of what I bring into my team.
And I see you as being so incredibly curious that I'm sure you're taking in all the time what you see people do well, right? As part of your how you listen and how you see people just acting. I can tell that from our conversation.
Well, also a lot is how you make people feel. So one of the things I'm really passionate about when it comes to change is there's a book out there called Switch. And I love the metaphor. I love metaphors. I speak in analogies, and they talk about change as you're a guy on top of an elephant. And the guy on the elephant is your logical mind, but the 5-ton elephant is your heart and your emotion and how you feel about something. So whenever you're trying to get somebody to move, it's just not about giving them all the facts and figures. You have to appeal to the emotions. And so that's a big thing that I also, make sure that we don't forget and only talk to one third of what a person has, right? You have to talk to their logic, their emotion, and then the facts, right? The path and stuff is an important piece as well.
You got to make the connection with the elephant.
Yes.
Here's one that's a little different. How do you have a role model?
I have lots. I mean, obviously you can see by my shelf, I'm
lots of books there.
There's a lot of books, and they're all really random across the place. I think if I were to say one, it wouldn't be accurate. I think I just keep trying to be a better one myself.
We have time for one more, and there's still so many questions in here. So apologies for not being able to get to all of them. There's some really good ones in here. Oh, I like this one too. So you've done a lot of self-exploration, and we talked about this when we talked last, and take a lot of action yourself, which is awesome. In coaching, what were your most profound takeaways, and how did it impact you?
I think it came in phases. The first time I got to coach, the accountability to a person for keeping promises I had actually made to myself was probably the biggest aha. I didn't realize how much I wasn't keeping promises to myself. The second probably biggest thing is when I hired a mastermind coach, and she reflected how small I was playing because I was staying with what I was good at, and I had a fear of failure for moving past that. So I think her reflection on why she saw me playing small was a huge impact into Amy 3.0.
I love that, playing small as an inspiration for thinking bigger and pushing yourself out of the comfort zone, but into a place where there's passion and joy.
One of my biggest quotes I love is people always say, like, oh, do you ever get imposter syndrome? And I try to say they're moments. It's not a syndrome. It's just a moment. But that I actually have reframed that to like feeling that like I'm not good enough to do that. Like I could have felt that about sitting here in our conversation, is like that discomfort is actually good. That means I'm growing. It means I'm in my stretch zone. That means I'm doing something I've never done that may lead to a new path. And so I think that that's one of the biggest things I'd hope to leave like as women, is like we just stop each other from saying those moments of and feeling I'm not good enough, and just keep building each other up, where I'm so proud of you for being uncomfortable. How can I hold your hand right now in this moment and let you know, like, you're safe out here, where you feel on the plank. So that's the biggest thing. I have to thank so many women for doing that for me.
Amy, this has been delightful. I love how reflective you are. I love that you've invested in yourself and you believe in yourself enough to take those big leaps. It's been wonderful to hear of your success as you enter into Amy 3.0, and look forward to hearing more about that. And who knows what 4.0, 5.0 might bring.
That's right.
There's a whole series here in the books. I really want to say thank you for joining us today and for sharing your story, how important it is to push yourself sometimes out of the comfort. You weren't set back by things that you could have considered to be major failures. You've just considered them to be part of your journey and embraced what you can learn through those. And I think that there's inspiration for anyone who's listening today in that. And for people who are running organizations and want to make sure that they're finding space to advance women, some great advice there too about giving people the opportunity to develop, giving them space to reflect and to work on themselves, and really support and make them feel safe as they move through their career. So I want to thank you very, very much again for joining us. I want to end this on time here for everybody. And invite you to join me again next week. We have a wonderful conversation planned with Cheryl Fullerton from Chorus Entertainment. Same date of the week, same time of the day. I hope you can join us then as well. For those of you